Southern California, yeah.
Born and raised our DNA. Laugh and cry to what we say. We hit you with that wordplay.
4053.
What episode are we on? D, they feeling like they be zombies, all dressed in Abercrombie.
SoCal DNA coming in live. 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night. COVID got you sitting inside. Why not sip one and free your mind?
Cheap thrills, popping pills, stat cash, spend it fast.
Listen to all of Don's lies as Arjun act like he's surprised.
Well, we have a very, very special episode of the SoCal DNA podcast today. Now, there's been a lot of champions this past year. We have, of course, from the PGA Tour, the oldest champion, 50-year-old Phil Mickelson, shout out to him. We have, of course, last year's NBA champion, none other than LeBron James and the LA Lakers. But none of those guys, neither of those two guys compare to the champion of champions we have today on this very special episode of the SoCal DNA podcast. And of course, I'm talking about the SoCal Classic 2021 Fantasy Basketball Champion, none other than the great, illustrious, legendary, and let me stress this hard, super creative, Derek Zhang. Welcome to the show, Derek. How are you?
Wow, thanks, Arjun. That's an intro I've never had before. Let's just say that.
It's an intro you should have every day of your life, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Without further ado, of course, let me kind of break it down for the audience. Derek and I used to work together at a company called Synaptics. We had great conversations. He would oftentimes play ball with me after work. He would kick my ass, block all my shots.
No.
And, I learned a lot from him. He's a very, very solid, outstanding individual. And I kept in touch with him, even as I moved on from Synaptics. And he's been kind enough to participate in my fantasy basketball league that I run every year. And he's fairly new at it. I think, Derek, is this your second year, right?
Yeah, this is the second year in your league.
Yeah.
But I've been doing it for a couple years now. So
Yeah,
not that noob. Not
That's
that
right.
much of a noob.
That's right. Actually, he's been a veteran of the fantasy sports for sure for quite some time. In my league, only 2 years, but he brings all that veteran wisdom with him. And he certainly made a big splash. I knew he was something special, not even from this fantasy basketball stuff, but even prior to that. I think we had this playoff bracket challenge from like a year ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago before the bubble.
Yeah, it was when Kawhi Leonard won. I feel like that's
Yeah, I was all the way on Toronto. I remember that now. Yeah.
Man, that was a wild run that you had. I think you were the only one that picked them too, to go like almost all the way, or maybe you did pick him all the way. And from that point forward, I knew, okay, since he won that competition, I gotta make sure he joins the Fantasy Basketball League because he can bring a lot of competition that, quite honestly, we've been lacking. You'll probably notice by now, by the clarity of this conversation and the lack of low IQ that's been going on so far, that one person is missing, one very critical component of the SoCal DNA is missing today, and that is none other than my co-host, my usual co-host, Don Ballanai. Now, Don is preoccupied at the moment. He's busy off in the world doing interesting things, I imagine, this weekend. So we decided to very temporarily replace one D with another D, a more competitive D, a more, if I would say, intellectual D. So the conversations you're about to hear today on the SoCal DNA podcast will be like none other. It will be very high level, it'll be very engaging, and hopefully entertaining for the masses. But essentially, I'm glad that Derek is on board with this fantasy basketball league of mine. He kicked all of our asses this past season. He even had an upset, I believe, in the playoffs. I mean, it was him against, one of my good buddies, Leroy, who might be listening in on this podcast later on. He wasn't too happy, by the way, Derek, when he found out that he was going to lose this matchup against you. He was a little bit
I do feel bad because, it was 2 3-pointers because we do categories, right? And I don't know how it happened. And it just happened where I streamed in one guy who luckily hit like 2 threes. And that's how much I won by. So I do kind of feel bad for him. I felt bad after I won. I was like, damn, it doesn't, when it feels right, but it also feels wrong at the same time. It was one of those moments where I was happy to win, but also felt bad for, my opponent. that week.
But I mean, sometimes, as humble champions that you are, and I was at one point in my life, I mean, I forget last time I won, sometimes we say these things, but in our heart of hearts, we're so fucking proud of ourselves for finally winning a championship. So in reality, Derek, in your truth, do you really feel bad for Leroy, or are you just so happy that you won?
I mean, I felt bad for like a good hour. Then I moved
Solid.
on. Yeah,
Solid.
and I moved on to like, okay, I gotta prep. I gotta win now because
Mm.
that's what I'm going for. I'm going for the chip. So yeah, that hour lasted, and I moved on pretty quickly.
There you
Sorry,
go.
sorry,
There you
Leroy.
go. But I'm glad that you also invited me to participate in your league. Derek, of course, is not just a participant in fantasy basketball leagues. He runs his own league as well, and might I say, he's one of the best commissioners that I know. I've come across many league commissions, but he knows what he's doing. His constituents respect him immensely, and he manages to find like what 10 or 12 people every single year, which is not easy nowadays. It's kind of hard.
Yeah,
As you
it's
can,
very hard.
yeah,
I don't know why it gets harder every year, but finding people who, because there's so many people who like basketball, right? But for some reason, finding someone who is willing to participate in this, like 5 6 month long league is so much work.
It is, and I don't know. Like I know we both have different strategies when it comes to retaining our members. I tend to go on the individual route. Like I like to reach out to people individually and kind of maybe talk them up a little bit and catch up on some other things, and then I'm like, hey, so it's about that time of year again, and not only that, I have the added kind of dubious honor, you could say, of saying, "Oh, also the buy-in is $5 more this year than last year." I tend to pull that one off because in my mind, I don't know how you feel, Derek, but I think it's more meaningful, if the buy-in is a little bit higher, maybe not every single year, but every 2 years or so, to make us feel more competitive, to make us more invested in the actual challenge. Do you feel the same way? Do you try to, raise the buy-in every now and then, like inflation, or not really?
Um, I did in the past.
Mm,
You know,
mm,
the thing about my league, most like there's a mixture of like people with jobs and people who are in school.
mm,
So raising it kind of felt like disingenuous towards people who weren't earning that much money. Because for us,
mm,
like yeah, five bucks. Or I mean, for those who are working, $5 isn't too much of a big difference.
mm-hmm.
So raising like throwing that out isn't for fun. Throwing using that $5 for fun isn't a big deal. But
Sure.
for someone who doesn't have a job, that's like half a meal now. It can go five bucks can do some damage to the wallet. So I try not to mix it up too much. Try to keep it fair.
Mm,
And I find that like lowering the buy-in also helps people come back because
mm,
like if you've won, yeah, like you're more inclined to return because like hey, I won, like I can do it again.
right. You're
But
playing
for
with
the
house money at that point. Yeah.
yeah, but like those who aren't necessarily doing so hot become more and more like unmotivated to rejoin. So I,
Mm.
I find that keeping it consistent helps retain these players.
I actually like what you said right there because I was on the other end of that for fantasy football. Um, I don't know if it's still going on. It probably is. For my old workplace, Derek's current workplace in Synaptics, there was a reoccurring fantasy football league, and the commissioner was usually Jordan Wilcox. It was him and one of our colleagues, Jonathan Ta. He was part of it too. Several other people. Ketten was kind of on and off on it, and I played for every year that I was there. I played, and don't get me wrong. Like whenever I compete in something, especially these fantasy sports, I try to pay attention. I try to follow along and make all the right moves. But I've never won any money in his league. And the buy-in was kind of heavy, heavier than our league's buy-ins for sure. It was like $50 or $60 every year, and it started to get to a point. I think in my last year with them, I was just thinking, why am I doing this? I lose every year. I don't even make the playoffs, and the buy-in just keeps getting a little bit more expensive. So at a certain point, I was just thinking, it's not worth it for me. I don't even watch these games. I'm not that much of a football fanatic as I am for basketball. I'm going to step away. And that decision was, I would say, for me, a good decision. I don't know about you, Derek, but do you feel like sometimes, maybe in the past you've done this, you're forced to pay a little bit more attention because of fantasy to certain numbers, to certain players that otherwise, when you're just enjoying the game, you wouldn't really care about?
Oh, 100%. Like, I have to say, like, because of fantasy, I know more about the league overall, like other teams, other players, what's going on.
Mm.
Because I used to only legitimately care about the Lakers. Like, it was the Lakers, and then the other teams that I kept up with were like um those the Lakers would face, because like want to
Mm-hmm.
get a gist of who our competitors were.
Sure.
But now, I know people on like the worst teams in the league. I know their names, I know their roles, and it's nice. But at the same time, like for me, they're just like stats in a box score.
Mm.
That's all I truly look at the end of the day for fantasy.
Mm. And I think, it definitely changes your perspective. I remember I was just like you before I started playing fantasy basketball back in high school. I just loved the Lakers. I thought it was so much fun to watch Kobe every night. We didn't have the best team back then. This was Kobe when he was like leading the league in scoring.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Shaq
yeah.
was gone. We didn't have Pau yet. And, I just loved watching that basketball action. One of my friends, when he invited me to play fantasy basketball, I didn't know what I was doing. Nobody really taught me anything. So, you know what I did? And this is kind of embarrassing. I drafted all the Lakers I could find. And I didn't even get Kobe. So just imagine how bad my team was. I had like the Brian Cooks of the world, the Smush Parkers. I don't even know who else was on there. Chris Mim. I think I
Oh,
was
Chris
happy.
Mim,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I was happy that I had Chris Mim on my team.
Sasha, did you get Sasha by any
I got
chance?
Sasha late. Yep, yep. I had Sasha.
Nice.
But then even I had like Javaris Crittenton. Do you remember him?
Oh, I do. He was like one of our rookies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I liked him a little bit, but then he got caught up into some gun charges later on with Gilbert Arenas on the Wizards,
yeah. Yes,
and his career never was the same after that. But
that was something.
it was something for sure. But it's kind of how it is. Like when you have to play this game or play fantasy in general, you are forced to learn more about different players, and in some ways, it is interesting. I guess you can appreciate certain characters out there that otherwise you wouldn't pay attention to. But in the grand scheme of things, it certainly changes the way we view the game. And speaking of viewing the game, it is kind of refreshing nowadays to finally see in the highlights that I watch, or even some of the fourth quarters that I have the opportunity to watch, fans being in the arena. It was kind of weird last year. As much as I still appreciated the fact that the NBA went on during the COVID pandemic, and I mean, the pandemic's still going on, but it felt weird not having a single fan in attendance all of last season, even when the Lakers won the COVID championship. It didn't quite feel as special as it did back when I saw Kobe, Pau, Lamar Odom, and Bynum do it back to back. So
Yeah.
now with the fans back in, how does that feel for you? Is it kind of like refreshing to see live audiences again?
I mean, I don't really pay attention to the audience per
Mm,
se, but
mm,
but when like teams go on a run, you hear the crowd. It
mm,
does like also boost your morale, or you feel that impact of the crowd noise,
mm.
right? But I have to say, the current recent events with fans, it's kind of disheartening with the popcorn, the name calling,
Mm.
the spitting. All of that is it's sucks. It sucks to see. I guess that's the best way I can put it.
I'm really glad you segued into that, and that was a beautiful segue, much better than when Don does it or when even I do it. So I really appreciate that. Out of all the incidents that have been going on with fan interactions in a negative light, which one do you think was the most flagrant?
I would have to say the spitting for sure.
Mm,
Right? Like, you
mm,
just don't do that. It
mm.
like even if it weren't a sport, like in a regular regular setting, you wouldn't spit on someone. Like I understand. Like you've seen people like throw waters in people's faces when they say something like terrible. So like it's kind of like that with popcorn, I get, but you don't spit in some at someone. That's just like wrong.
Do you think like spitting is the sign of like ultimate disrespect?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else you could do
Mm.
that's like I wouldn't say it's passive, but it's not like, it's not like throwing a punch like or like a sucker punch.
Mm. Mm.
So and it's like when the spitting happened with Rondo and Chris Paul, like I think it was a year ago actually, when Rondo was on the Lakers. When that
Um,
happened, yeah, it
yeah.
was just as bad, right? It was like
Mm.
people were furious. So to see that happen again, like it it it's it sucks.
I think especially more so in this case because, COVID's still going on, and
Oh,
part
100%.
part of
Yeah.
the reason why we wear masks and everything is to make sure that we're not breathing in these the spittle, the particles, and we're not like exposing our own spit, saliva, whatever it may be, through the air to other people. So if all of a sudden in that climate, in this pandemic environment, you have some guy from the second row, some New York Knicks fan, maybe got a ticket from a buddy or maybe he paid his own, who knows, just thinking it's acceptable in a basketball game, a live basketball game, to spit not directly at a player, but over a first row of fans toward a player. I think that's just very, very ignorant of everything that's happening, and it was just a bad move overall. But
Yeah, for sure.
did you realize who was sitting in front of that particular fan during that game? I didn't catch this initially, but I heard about this on some radio show the next day. 50 Cent, the rapper 50
Yeah,
Cent.
yeah, yeah, I think I did. I saw like a comment on like that was 50 Cent right above, like right in front of him.
Yeah, and
It's crazy.
and apparently, 50 Cent was with some woman, I don't know who, and the woman probably got hit a little bit with the spittle on the way of the loogie going toward Trey
Yeah,
Young.
some secondhand,
Yeah, yeah. Some secondhand spit or whatever you may call it, and it was a bad look for sure. And of course, there's always gonna be some rowdiness from the fans, and it's expected that during the playoffs, emotions are heightened. The vernacular, the rhetoric is more flagrant. It's more fiery, and it's one thing to just kind of spew expletives and shout out things, but when you take it to a level of throwing popcorn, like in Russell Westbrook's situation, or spitting toward an active player, I think that definitely crosses the line. Do you agree with the punishments that were handed down? Lifetime bans.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Mm.
That's it. I mean, it's hard to enforce to say like reject these people from all arenas. I mean, the odds of them going to a different arena depends on where they are or how often how willingly or how much they love basketball, I guess.
Mm.
But
Mm.
it would be nice to see them banned from all arenas as well.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think a global kind of NBA wide ban is not a bad idea. It's just, I wonder if these things can actually be prevented. And I feel like the answer is no. I think as long as you have this kind of proximity, which is a privilege, to be honest, for NBA fans, as opposed to, let's say, football fans or even other sports, right? Because in NBA, when you're courtside like that, when you're near the tunnel like that, you're pretty much within physical distance. You could reach out and touch a player. You could interact with a player. You can hear all the commentary, all the smack talking, all the things that doesn't show up on TV. When you're there live, sitting courtside, you can hear all that. And along with it, you're afforded all these privileges. But at the same time, I think fans, especially the rowdy ones, sometimes they get too into it. They feel like, oh, they can tell their boys later on, like, hey, I spit on Trey Young, or hey, I pissed off Westbrook even more than he's already pissed off. I just think it's something that, they'll always, have the ability to do, for better or for worse. But what can be done to try to prevent this? Do you think having more security there, or pushing the courtside seats back a little bit, would any of those things help?
That's hard, like never in my mind personally have I thought, "Oh, I should spit on this person right now." You know what I mean? Like it's just not it doesn't even come to my head.
Yeah.
Nor should I like I feel like, "Oh, I need to throw popcorn at this dude because I don't like him." Like I that never happens.
Mm. Mm.
So I don't know. I don't know how much of it you can blame on liquid courage or whatever
Yeah.
like whether it's just pure hatred, I don't know. It's hard to say, like cuz it's just
Mm.
to me it's just mind-boggling like a person would do that to begin with. Cuz you paid money to be there, right? You pay money to buy a ticket
Mm.
to enjoy a, a game, right? That's what the NBA has it really is. And basketball. It's a form of entertainment.
Mm.
And just because these players are playing doesn't mean we can treat them however the heck we want. They're still people, they have families. So, like, it's just like respect. I don't know. Like, to me, that it's like common sense not to spit at someone.
Right. You would think all of that should be par for the course, but going back to what you said earlier about liquid courage, I think that's partly true. But also, I think in the moment when you're viewing these athletes, you're not viewing them as people. I'm not saying this is true for everybody when they watch the game, but I think for those individuals, the ones that throw popcorn, the ones that spit, they're kind of viewing the athletes as sheer entertainment. And maybe in the back of their minds, they're thinking, you know what? This is my chance. This is my opportunity to kind of get back at them if I don't like what they're doing. I'm not going to be this close before. Hey, maybe I'll be on camera. Maybe my buddies will be recording it. This will be a story to tell. I'll basically get some clout, whether it's on IG or Snapchat or whatever social media platform, by doing this. Maybe that's what's going through their heads some of the time. Maybe they're not even thinking that far ahead. Maybe it's just some like visceral reaction, like, oh, I don't like what's happening, I don't like this dude, I'm just going to do whatever I can from where I'm sitting, from where I'm standing, to make sure my displeasure is known, even if that means, yes, there's a risk, I'm going to be kicked out. I'm just going to throw it. I'm going to shoot this loogie, I'm going to throw this popcorn, or I'm going to call somebody the N word or whatever it may be. And that's another thing that I wanted to ask you about as well. In the past, we've seen confrontations between the fans and players centered around the vocabulary that's been used. Remember back in Utah, there was a playoff situation, I believe, where Westbrook was like warming up near the fans, or he was standing around near the fans, and somebody was just curling, or hurling rather, all these expletives and saying really nasty things toward Westbrook. And eventually the fan got booted out, and probably he was banned for life. Do you think that's harder to stop? Because I think you can't stop fans from saying that stuff. You can stop them from maybe throwing shit and spitting, but aren't fans always going to be rowdy and saying the wildest things, especially when the enemy is blowing up for 50 points?
Yeah, I think, I guess this comes from like the age of internet, I guess, just where people are feel free to say whatever they want and like be keyboard warriors, but when they bring it to like a live stage,
Mm.
um it's hard to like really prevent that, right? Because they think, oh, this person's not going to pay attention to me. I'm just a bystander in this huge crowd. They're not going to really figure out who I am. So I'm just going to hurl expletives and hopefully they hear it, I guess.
Mm.
So they're kind of just like this one voice in the crowd, or maybe, someone else is also saying other things at the same time and just throw words at people. You
Mm.
can't really stop that, right? You can't just say put a sign up and say don't curse, and like that doesn't stop anyone. So I'm not too sure, like
Mm.
it's to me it's just having the respect towards the player as a person. Just like these guys are just these guys are there because they're talented as hell.
Yeah,
Like not
absolutely.
because like you don't get just because they're playing a sport doesn't mean you can treat them any differently
Mm.
or should treat them any differently. Like they're people, and that's all there is to it, at least in my eyes.
I respect the way you look at the game, and I think that is the right way to look at it. I think the NBA, the most they can do is just warn the fans. And like you said, the fans that are really going to talk shit, they don't care about the warnings. They don't care about the signs. They don't care about the respect. But I would argue that for the most part, maybe 95% of the audience, they are respectful. They do appreciate the immense talent that's on the floor, like you and I do. But sometimes these players that we respect for their talent, sometimes they say things that are kind of interesting about current events, about social issues, and especially issues that pertain to other countries as well. And what I'm segueing into here actually starts with a recent article I read where John Cena, a very famous WWE wrestler, he's been wrestling for many years, but now he's more of a movie star, I would say. I think he's been on some TV shows. He's hosting Wipeout or whatever. In some context, he referred to the country of Taiwan as a country, which I believe it is. But when China heard about this, they were not too pleased. And that kind of caused some backlash from the Chinese media, from Chinese audiences about John Cena's words regarding Taiwan. And eventually that forced John Cena to issue an apology and then shower China with praise, almost profusely, kind of saying, oh, China's great, I made a mistake, sorry about that. And that made me think, okay, this isn't the first time we've heard about this. We've also heard this from, I guess in a different vein, LeBron James. LeBron James, of course, he is well known to be a champion for a lot of social issues, especially domestic social issues, and rightfully so. I think he does a great job of bringing attention to these things. But he's also known to be silent on other issues. Silent to the point of maybe willful ignorance, some might say. And it's specifically about China and some of the injustices that, are perceived to be happening over there. So what I wanted to ask you, do you think it's right for these high-profile celebrities, these sports celebrities, let's say, like a LeBron James, like a John Cena, and even James Harden, I think he came out earlier, he said how much he loves China. Do you think it's right for them to pick and choose which social issues, which, very hot-button issues to focus on and to bring attention to and ignore? Like, do you think it's right for them to highlight certain issues and not talk about other issues at all?
Dude, I mean, that's a hard question, right? Like, for sure, like, when it comes to domestic things or things that they personally have a connection to, like Black Lives Matter, like, these social issues, 100%, like, should be talked about, right?
Sure.
But for other issues, I guess in this example would be China, it's hard to really say because for them, I mean, obviously I don't know their personal lives, but I'm assuming for them, China's mainly just income and marketing, right? They sell jerseys. Jersey sales are huge in China. So
Sure.
I guess from a money standpoint, yeah, like they're saying what they're saying because they don't want to lose that source of income. And so it's weird because they're two different reasons why they're talking about it or bringing it up, if that makes sense. Because one is like personal, but the other is financial. So it's like it does feel vain when they are praising China purely because it's financial. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky line to walk, because like you mentioned, merchandise sales from their jerseys, and let's kind of bring it back to basketball for like these athletes like LeBron, that's true. But for LeBron James, he's probably into other businesses as well that have connections to China and are tied to China's growth and Chinese investment, maybe for production reasons, maybe for, who knows what. And he does have to be careful. I think he does have to be a little bit of a politician at times to protect his own estate, to protect his income, to protect all the different ventures he has. And I also wonder, as it pertains to the NBA, do you think the NBA kind of has a pseudo gag order for all of its players and managers and team personnel to not really discuss these things?
Oh, I don't. I want to say that it's like a unwritten rule.
Mm,
Like
mm,
not like when people start to speak out. It especially about like very touchy subjects.
mm-hmm.
Um, it creates division, which is not exactly what a league would want when they're just trying to, you know, make money. So when
Mm,
you divide your viewers, it's bad for the what do you call it, the fine, not the fine line, but it's bad for the checkbook, I guess.
mm,
Um, so I want to say like yeah, I'd say there's this like unwritten rule where you try not to speak out about certain topics that would ultimately put like negative light onto the league
mm.
or the team, I guess, as well.
That's very true. Um, and I think too often negativity is spread so easily. Um, it can spread through, or be caused by these social injustice issues that are happening, but it can also be caused by negative reviews on songs and albums that fans of the SoCal DNA really appreciate. And this harkens back to an older episode where I reviewed the album Boy by Derek's one of Derek's favorite artists, Rack. And I seem to recall I didn't really have the most favorable opinion of the album. I was a little bit harsh. My co-host Don had a more optimistic perspective. He liked a lot of things, and he even wanted to collaborate with the producer and singer, or whatever he does, whatever Rack does, RAC, Rack, however you pronounce it. So I wanted to first get Derek, your take on Rack's album, because I don't think I fully got that from you. You heard our opinion, but how did you like Boy by Rack from what you remember?
So, oh wow, this was I think a year ago, a little bit over a year ago.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a minute.
It's been a while. I think for me it was just I like
Mm,
more ambient music,
mm,
like I mean I do enjoy like bassy things or bassy songs or poppy songs.
mm.
But I think if you looked at my Spotify catalog, it's like 70% like more ambient, more chill,
Sure,
that kind of vibe.
sure.
So for me, that album was pretty solid, right? It
Mm,
had a lot of like, it was a great transition between, there were songs in it that like helped it flow as a whole. And I don't really, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really remember my like impressions of it too well now since it's been over a year. Um,
yeah, I mean, I think
but
it has been some time since the Rack album review, but since then, I'm sure you've listened to a lot of different, chill hop wave, or as I put it, bubblegum pop albums and music since
right,
then.
right. I remember that part. You used bubblegum pop. That's a new like word that I've heard, I guess, coming from you.
Yeah, it was something that was kind of in the moment at the time. But one thing that kind of stuck out to me, back when you and I were, sharing a lot of music, and you especially were, enlightening me with a lot of this new genre of music for me. One thing you said was it kind of brings you to like a happy place, right? Like when you listen to it, like mentally, it allows you to go into a zone where other music genres don't really do that for you. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a great way of putting it. Um, I guess to like really explain it, it's like the way I see it is music that would work as a soundtrack in a movie or in a video, right? Where if I were the main subject or the main character, like, or not even the main character, but if it's just like this B-roll of like something scenic, something relaxing, or something emotional, like it's the type of music you would hear in the background while that is happening.
Mm. Mm. And I think there was this one woman that you really liked as well. It's I for okay. I'm gonna mock you a little bit here. I think the name might have been like Chelsea Cutler or something like this. But
Yes.
but but I just
Yes.
remember this one, and I'm misremembering this lyric. But it was like, "Put your arms in my sweater, then Does that sound right? Like there was something about like a sweater, either from her significant other or herself, and she was like in the sweater. Maybe the song was called Sweater or the album itself. I have no idea. But is that typically how she sings? Like she kind of has this, this. What do you like about this Chelsea Cutler? How about we how about we start from there?
So I really like her songwriting.
Mm,
That's really it. Like the way
mm,
I don't like her lyrics aren't complicated, I guess.
mm.
From judging from, put your arms in my sweater. I don't know that song, gonna be honest. I don't know if that is the song with her, but her lyrics in general are pretty straightforward, and
Mm.
it's gonna be what I'm gonna say is gonna be super cheesy, but it just helps me feel, like an emotion.
Wow.
So I think it does a good job of that, and that's why I enjoy it a lot.
And
And it,
and sorry to interject, but what
no, no,
what emotion does it help you feel exactly?
no. I guess it depends on the song, right?
Ah,
Some of
okay.
them are like, some of them are more like happy, some of them are more sad, some are more like,
Ah,
um, I don't know if there's a word for it. Maybe I just don't know what it, but it's like
mm.
the sad emo um romance kind of song. I don't know if that makes
Ah,
sense.
okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So she kind of has a she's a little versatile in what she can do, what she talks about, her lyrics, but she kind of has a go-to, right? She has like a bread and butter of this like sad, emotional, uh, maybe sour bubblegum pop type of thing going on. But no, she her voice was interesting for sure, and of course she's been hitting some of the Billboard top 200s recently, right? I think she had one particular song that went to like number 23 in the top 200. I'm just kind of reading her Wikipedia very loosely, by the way. That's the only
Ah,
reason.
okay.
The only reason why I know this.
Even I don't know this. How do you know this?
Man, but so with music, it's been quite some time since a lot of these artists have been touring with live audiences, but slowly but surely I think things are starting to open up again. And I just found out about this. I was listening to the radio. There's something called Eurovision. I don't know if you know what that is, but
I
Eurovision
don't.
is supposed to be like an annual celebration of sorts of European pop artists. And it's not just pop, it's like you got all different genres in there, I suppose, but they kind of celebrate and give awards to the best of the best. And this was the first time, I think, in a year or two that they had the Eurovision again. It was like the big coming back of this contest or this competition, whatever you want to call it. And I thought, oh wow, okay, so concerts are now going to be a thing again. And with America even starting to open up, I think Biden said something about, by June or by July, he's expecting most of America to be open back up with the restaurants, indoor dining, and amusement parks almost to full capacity, so on and so forth. When do you think personally you'll be comfortable going to, let's say, an indoor venue, listening to music of an artist that you truly enjoy?
That's a great question because I actually had a ticket for a concert back last year that got moved to later this year.
Mm.
So, you know, it's about to be June. I'm the concert's in, I think, October, end of October.
Okay.
So, in those 4 months, I hope that I'm ready to go back to a indoor venue.
Mm-hmm.
Because even now, just like going out still feels wrong.
Even
Even
now?
though,
Even now?
yeah, even now, I think it's because
Huh.
I like throughout the pandemic, I really did my best to stay in,
Mm.
right? Like the main times that I went out were to go to Costco to get groceries,
Mm-hmm.
or the couple of times I had to go into the office. But other than that, I was home for a lot of those days.
Mm.
So I guess I just got like used to the idea of staying at home, just being distant from other people.
Mm.
So I'm slowly getting back, hanging out with people, going out to eat,
Sure.
slowly get used to that. So maybe in 4 months, yeah, I would be ready to go back to a concert um, with other people.
Mm. Mm. And I know like it's been kind of experimental for some of these artists as well. They were trying different things. I don't know if you heard, but there was some group out there where they wanted to have live audiences, but they wanted to protect them at the same time. So it was almost like every single audience member was in a bubble. They made like individual bubbles for everybody in the audience, and the music was kind of pumped through the sphere, like it was pumped through the bubble
Whoa,
itself, and
I've never heard of that. Okay.
it was kind of, it's kind of interesting, and of course like it's a spectacle just looking at the picture of it all, right? Obviously you have the 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 crew up top on the stage, with their guitars and everything, and they're not masked or whatever, they're just performing as they usually would. And then you look out in the audience and there's like a sea of these large plastic bubbles with like people of all shapes and sizes jumping
Like
around.
hamster wheels and everything.
It very much seemed like a hamster wheel. Everybody had
Okay.
their own hamster wheel and they were just having a good time. And I just thought it's kind of cool to see that in one way, because when people really want to do something, when they really want to accomplish something, they find a way. Even if there are these social rules or rules to basically obey public health and safety standards, they find very creative ways to still do what they want, and I found that very interesting. And I'm sure there's other examples out there as well. Actually, you even look at like a lot of the live events for sports. Something that's very common, they would have like screens where a fan sitting at home would be just streaming their live video.
Right. The face cams.
The face cams, that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
How did you feel about the face cams? What was that like for you, just seeing that?
It was a little weird, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, like, it was cool to see like the stars, or like the older vets that retired, who were there, like Dirk
Mm.
or Bill Russell, like, just throwing that out.
Yeah,
Like
sure.
these guys
Mhm.
who were in attendance, so to speak. But as a random fan to another random fan, I couldn't really care less.
I fully agree with you. Like,
Right.
I actually 100% agree with your sentiment, because it's cool to see celebrities you recognize, like famous players and all that, because that stands out to you. It's like, oh yeah, hey, I know that. That's pretty cool that they're watching this game too. But all the other people, and especially now that they're more prominently featured, like on the face cam, when they go around the arena, like it's very clear you get to see them. They're in their homes, or they're with their families. That's cool and all for them. I mean, they get to be on TV in some respect. But do I give a damn? Do I want to see them that
Exactly.
clearly in HD?
Exactly.
No, not at all. Like, please shut it off. Like, only have the ones on with the people that I recognize. How about that? But of course, maybe it's to kind of promote that, hey, we're all in this together. We care about the fans so much. We want them to feel like they're still there, even though physically they can't. If there's a way to do it with technology, we want to be inclusive. And kudos to the NBA, kudos to all the other leagues. I think I've heard that the WWE did something similar with like the Thunderdome in Florida. They just replaced everything with these large fan videos. So it's cool that they tried this, but I, for one, think that real sporting events should always have live fans. It's just not the same. And I didn't realize how much I appreciated the live audience until I went through watching those clips, watching those fourth quarters of video audiences and nobody in the stands. I think as a competitor, which I am not, by the way, I've never been an athlete in my life, but for these athletes, I think they also feel more motivated, more lively when they see tens of thousands of people around them either booing them to death or cheering them to new life. I think it gives some kind of adrenaline rush to them.
Oh,
And
for sure. Yeah.
and also,
Like,
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, like, even like playing in what do you call those? In the rec leagues back in college.
Oh, the
Yeah,
intramural leagues.
intramurals,
Yeah,
there you
yeah,
go. Yeah, like
yeah,
even having audiences in that, like whether it be like 4 or 5 people and then
yeah.
switching that to maybe like 10, 20,
Sure.
it's a whole nother ball game, right? You have
Oh yeah.
so like it just feels like so many eyes are on you.
Mm.
So
Mm.
yeah, it's just you hear the cheers when the other team makes it because I never had people cheer for me or my team. It was always the other team that had people cheering for them.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah, that makes a huge difference. So yeah, I get what you mean. I get what you mean.
And that also begs a very interesting question. I just thought of this. Do you think the results of last year's playoffs would have been different if COVID was never a factor? Let's say you had the full arenas jam packed for the playoffs. Would Lakers still win a championship? Or do you think, history might be different?
That's a good question. I mean, as a Laker fan,
Mm.
I'm gonna say it wouldn't have changed anything.
Mm. Mm.
Um, because the way I see the season playing out, the Lakers were, I wouldn't say the favorite, but they were getting hot, right? Like
Mm.
even from the bubble where the last like the 8 games prior to the playoffs, like they weren't doing so well, but if we bypass that and just continued playing from the end of the season where we like beat the Clippers, beat the Bucks, beat some other top team, we were like getting into form anyway. So I don't think it would have made a big difference.
Mm. Mm. Fair enough, and I think that's the right answer to say, coming from a Laker fan like you are, like I am. But this season, however, I just don't know if our Lakers can really fight tooth and nail all the way to the finish line. What does your gut tell you today? I know some games have already went down in the first round. Some injuries have happened as well. But what does your gut tell you about the Lakers' chances this year?
Oh, okay. I hope I don't piss off, like the other diehard Laker fans,
Sure.
but I don't feel it this year.
Ah.
I'm happy to be wrong. I'll gladly eat my words
Mm-hmm.
and be wrong,
Mm-hmm.
But the way I see the Bucks and the Sixers playing, the Utah playing, like they're just playing super well, right? And we're in a way scraping by against the Suns, who aren't a joke, I guess, but they're not seasoned. There's so many fresh playoff guys on that team.
Mm.
So and plus CP3's been injured. Not to say like like he's good, but he's also not like he doesn't have the best proven playoff record or track record. Um,
Hmm.
so I don't know. I see a very difficult path ahead of us if we do end up winning. It's gonna be a long, grueling, 6, 7 game series all the way if Lakers do make it.
It certainly has that feel to it this year, which is quite frankly, honestly surprising to me because in the off season, if you told me we added the reigning sixth man of the year in Montrezl Harrell, if you told me we upgraded at point guard with Dennis Schroeder, and later on we would get Andre Drummond, I would say our team improved. I would say our team got better. But I suppose, due to the long injuries for both AD and LeBron, we didn't do so hot in the regular season. Um, Maybe our team chemistry never really had a chance to develop like we wanted it to. And there's some question marks about Andre Drummond as well. Is he a good fit? Is he clogging up the lane? Is it better for AD to play center for the whole game? These are the questions that are circulating for the minds of Laker fans. But if you say it's a tough road for the Lakers to win it all, who do you think has the best shot to win a title this year?
Ooh, I think this year it comes down to the East.
Mm.
You have the Bucks, the Sixers, and the Nets.
Mm.
Like as much as I want to hate on the Nets, like you have three MVP caliber guys. Like it's hard to count them out, but I'm obviously rooting against them because it feels like they're just cheating in a way to get the chip.
Mm,
Um, Not like actual cheating, but just like having three MVP guys on the same team is like unfair. Not
sure,
unfair. I don't know how to really put it, but it sucks to see uh, as a non-Nets fan.
for sure,
Um,
for sure.
but yeah, I think this year the East has the best chance to make it through. Whichever team doesn't implode first is the one that will probably win.
Mm. I was thoroughly impressed by Giannis and his Bucks for the first round this year. I don't know if you know, but
Me too.
I guess they
Yeah.
swept Miami today.
Yeah. Yes, they did.
And in our little friendly competition that we have going on, none of us called Bucks in four, like not a single person. And,
Right.
and it makes sense, right? Miami, they made it all the way to the finals last year, and they were a very solid team. They retained most of the people that they had last year, this season. But what do you think happened? Do you think Miami just was a one-hit wonder, or did the Bucks actually get that much better?
I think it's a mixture of both. Like as much as the narrative of like the bubble running long and then a short off season.
Mm,
Um, the Heat didn't feel like. I mean, with Jimmy Butler, a guy who does need rest, it is hard to carry a team again. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And also they traded away a couple guys like Kelly Olynyk, Jay Crowder left, but they brought in Ariza and some other role players, and it wasn't another star. I mean, they tried with Oladipo, but he's been injured, so
Mm,
it's like I guess it wasn't meant to be in a way in a league where it feels like two stars are like the minimum to like make it decently to like the conference finals. I guess they didn't have it this year. So I don't want to say they're a one hit wonder,
mm.
but it kind of does look like that. I
It,
think a lot of the narrative last year was
mm-hmm.
they made it through the finals or they made it through the bubble really well because they're mentally tough. They have this strict culture with Spoelstra and Pat Riley that's been around for decades now
Right.
or a decade now. So I think they made it through because of that. But I don't see how they get better without a big move next year or the following years.
Yeah, going back to what you said about the two superstars being a prerequisite, right? Being table stakes nowadays. I actually thought they had to. I thought Bam Adebayo would be the second guy. But it turns out that Bam isn't really that caliber, at least in my opinion. He can do a lot for a team. He plays defense. Since he's kind of a smaller big, he has good lateral movement. He can cover the pick and roll but really well, the ball handler especially. He can shoot a little bit. He can pass. He can rebound. But he's not quite your top level star. And I guess, as you mentioned, Oladipo was supposed to be kind of the 1A to Jimmy Butler, but it just didn't pan out. I was one of the few people actually that said if Oladipo can stay healthy after getting traded to Miami, they would be my dark horse pick. I was thinking they would have what it takes to maybe challenge Brooklyn. But in hindsight, and especially based on the results now, I'm glad I didn't make that bet. I don't think it would have worked out in my favor at all. It seems like
Yeah.
this could be the East's year, as you mentioned. We got some heavy hitters over there. Philadelphia is playing really solid too. And of course, they have an MVP candidate in Joel Embiid. I thought that the NBA did something kind of interesting this year where they announced the top three finalists for every major, regular season award kind of at the same time. And of course, for MVP, we have the top three being Joel Embiid from Philadelphia. We have Stephen Curry, who has been shooting lights out at the end of the regular season from Golden State. And of course, we have Nikola Jokic. Out of the three, who to you deserves the MVP this year?
Ooh, for me, I really want Jokic to win it.
Mm.
I've been a Jokic fan for like the past couple years. I've picked him in my fantasy team in like consecutive years.
You did, yeah.
Um, and I because with Jamal Murray's injury, like he's been doing it all, and he's been doing it all for several years. To Let's be honest. So I think for once, I believe he should win it. But the thing with Curry is like, yeah, he's been carrying the team because the rest of the roster isn't great. Like
Mm.
they're all solid players, I will say, but they're all very inconsistent. Like you have Wiggins, you have Oubre, you have Jordan Poole. These guys who all can score, but not on a nightly basis. And then with Embiid, he's on a roster with Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, but I think it comes down to Embiid or Jokic, just because the fact that with Embiid, any game Embiid was out, Philly looked horrible. Like
Mm.
they just they just didn't look good without him there. So he is very vital to that team, right? Which is kind of what MVP means. So I see it coming down to those two guys. But I want Jokic to win. I don't know. What do you think?
I was debating about this pretty much all season. Um, Before LeBron got hurt, I was kind of thinking, if LeBron can put up similar numbers like he's doing now for the entire season, and the Lakers end up maybe top seed in the West, I think it makes sense to give it to LeBron. But then he got hurt, so LeBron to me was eliminated from the equation. Chris Paul had a prolific impact on the Suns, going from what they were last season and in seasons past with only Devin Booker and Ayton to now with Chris Paul. They made a monumental leap. And I know the stats don't really show it. When you look at Chris Paul's numbers, his averages, they do not stack up at all with the top three contenders. But sometimes it's more than just about the statistics, and I really felt like Chris Paul deserved more nominations than he received this year. I was hoping to see him in the top three, even as an outside shot. Um, and in a similar vein, you look at a guy like Damian Lillard. Lillard has been, in my opinion, underappreciated year after year. He carried the Blazers for a long while. As you will recall, CJ McCollum was out for quite some time, but Dame kept trucking along, hitting tough shots, pouring in 30 a night. And it's just unfortunate because his team never does that great, and even in the postseason, he never goes that far. So he ends up being underappreciated, even though he's carrying the team night in and night out. Out of the three that's left, I've watched some of the games where Curry was just lights out. I saw the play-in games. He was amazing there, trying to will the team to a victory, but it just wasn't meant to be. I have to agree with you, man. I would say Jokic because Embiid missed too many games, man. I think if Embiid was healthy all season, I'd probably give it to him for his dominance. But Jokic played, I believe, all 72, and he was a stud, top to bottom. Whether you look at it from a winning perspective, a plus minus perspective, PER, or even from fantasy basketball, he was the best of the best. And for the MVP, you always have to strike a balance between individual play and your record, your team's win-loss record. For that reason, Curry to me is eliminated. And
Okay.
because of the absence of Embiid for like a month or so, or maybe 3 weeks or whatever, I know it's kind of petty to say that, but I think he's eliminated as well. Jokic is the perfect balance. His team did well enough, and he played amazingly well all 72 games. And they always say the best ability is availability, and I believe in that
Ooh,
strongly.
that's a good one.
Oh
That's a
yeah,
good one.
for sure. And so I agree with you. I think Jokic, he deserves it. My guess would be he'll probably win it. But switching gears a bit from the NBA Most Valuable Player to the Defensive Player of the Year, of course the finalists are Rudy Gobert, Draymond Green, and Ben Simmons. Who do you think deserves it this year? This one's tough.
That's a hard question. I don't pay too much attention to Defensive Player of the Year, to be honest.
Mm.
I mean, personally for me, I would say it's Matisse Thybulle. I don't know if you know who that is,
Yeah,
but
the Philadelphia 76er guy. He's great
yes,
for steals.
he steals and blocks and just
Yeah.
all around defense. Like that man is phenomenal,
Mm.
and
Mm.
he in my heart, he is the defensive player of the year because the amount of blocks he's gotten, steals he's gotten, is insane. Um, so with when it comes to the big guys, right? With Rudy Gobert,
Mm.
he's obviously an impact player, right? Like if you go into the paint, you're probably gonna get blocked, right?
Sure.
Like, but at the same time, like I don't really know what Draymond does, which sounds harsh,
Uh-huh.
but like I understand he passes well, he can block some shots, he plays some good, like he's a big body, but I've never seen him like play outstanding defense because I don't watch Warrior games.
Mm.
And then when I do, I pay attention to Curry, right, or Thompson. I don't pay attention to Draymond.
Sure, I think that's true for most of us, yes.
Yeah, Ben, I've watched a good amount of Sixers games this year just because I had a couple of those guys on my fantasy team.
Sure.
I did like his impact on defense a lot.
Mm.
Like he had like quick hands, and he was like he stayed in front of his man quite often. Um, but I out of these three guys, I'd probably say Gobert again. This is a safe pick just because I don't know too much about defense. So
Sure.
I'll probably just say Gobert. Yeah.
No, it makes sense too because I think the Utah Jazz they had the best record in the West, if not the whole NBA. I forget exactly who has the best in the NBA. Typically, you want to reward people who play well on the best team, whether it's for the MVP or for defensive player or even six man. Um, I kind of agree with you though. I don't know how to gauge this contest because I don't pay attention to, all the different statistics that go into defense, like the number of deflections and, your on ball defense against certain defenders. Safe pick as well for me, I would say Rudy Gobert, but this is more so because they have the best record in the West. 76ers, though, are they the best in the East? I forget exactly.
Yeah, they're the best in the East.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess I don't watch enough 76er basketball to know how good of a defender Ben Simmons is. I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is in the tops. But for me, I know Draymond Green, he has been playing well this year relative to past seasons because Curry's been around all year. And that probably motivates him to stay healthy and to get in better shape and to play better defense. But like you, it's hard to kind of tell exactly how much he's influencing the game at times. So let's say Rudy Gobert for me as well. They already announced some of the other awards. Jordan Clarkson, I think well deserved for NBA Sixth Man of the Year.
Yeah.
It was a nice touch that Joe Ingles actually presented the award to him because he was
Yeah, that was
nominated.
really wholesome. That was a super wholesome like thing they put together, and I 100% am for it.
For sure, for sure. And similarly, I think they added a nice touch to the NBA Most Improved Player. This year, it was an interesting competition between, I suppose, early season favorite Jeremiah Grant from the Detroit Pistons. You had Michael Porter Jr., who's having a nice year all season long. And of course, it was a runaway favorite by the end, Julius Randle, who surprised me for sure. I mean, you and I, both being Laker fans, we expected Randall to be kind of, his usual bull in a china shop. Maybe he gets 20 points, 9 rebounds a night. But I don't think either of us thought that Randall would play this well for the Knicks, right?
Yeah, like it was surprising to see the number of 3-pointers he started to hit. Like
Mm.
that expansion to his game, I guess, really, brought it to another level. And yeah, it's great to see, like former Lakers making it. Guys the Lakers drafted,
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, they're not on Lakers anymore, but they're finding success in other places.
Mm-hmm.
So that's super cool to see.
Mm.
But yeah, I was surprised, like surprised to see him shoot so well from distance, which I guess, yeah, that definitely helped his game a lot.
For sure, for sure. And they also had a nice touch to present that award to him. I think his son, I forget his son's name, but a little kid, just walked up to Daddy while he was practicing with the award for Most Improved Player. And that was a really, really sweet thing to basically present it by somebody who means so much to him, just like Ingles meant so much to Clarkson, being his teammate and also a fellow six-man. So great look for the NBA there. And before we wrap up these end-of-season awards, I think we do have to touch on the Rookie of the Year, which is interesting. They named the three finalists LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, and Tyrese Halliburton. But frankly, I think you and I both believe it's a two-man competition. The question is, do you think LaMelo played enough games this year to get that Rookie of the Year award?
So it's weird, right? With LaMelo, he was great the games he played. Like,
Yeah.
I want to say, like, not every game, obviously, but, overall, he played really well. For what? 3-4 months of the season?
I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah. And with Edwards, he played out of his mind the last 2.
Yes.
So it's hard to compare because they're not like they weren't battling each other at the same time or playing well at the same time. It was like different times of the season. So I personally would say LaMelo just because it was a longer period and it felt like he was more important to the team as opposed to Anthony Edwards, who, like, he played phenomenally. Like, he scored so many points. Like, I think he already hit 40 points already, right? Or something like that?
At least once or twice, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, that's phenomenal. But it felt like it just came out of nowhere. So it was more of a shock factor rather than just, like, a prolonged success. Which is why I think people are like rooting for him more, just because it's a recency bias in a way. But yeah, I would say LaMelo.
Yeah, and again, to no surprise, I fully agree with you there. I think LaMelo, when he was healthy, it wasn't even a competition. But that's partly due to the fact that Anthony Edwards wasn't unleashed until maybe late into the season.
Yeah,
but,
that's a great way to put it.
There was always more hype around LaMelo to begin with. I think going back to his high school days, playing with his big brothers in Chino Hills, LaMelo was always touted to be the next great one, right? With Lonzo entering the NBA, kind of becoming a disappointment and settling into this role where he's kind of a unique point guard. There's nobody really like him, but that's not exactly a high honor to say either. And then you have LiAngelo, who, maybe not even worth mentioning. And then LaMelo, to me, he can probably be, if not already, the best ball brother in the NBA. He kind of reminds me, and I don't want to say cookie cutter here, but there's like this archetype, for lack of a better word, of NBA point guards that are kind of like a Steph Curry, kind of like a Trae Young, kind of like a Lillard, so to speak, that can do a little bit of everything, but primarily they're score first. And LaMelo, being a little bit taller than the guys I mentioned, I think he has the ability to get, triple doubles every now and again, which can only help his game. And I think when you consider all the struggles Lonzo had early on in his career with injuries and poor free throw shooting, poor three-point shooting, poor shooting in general, and you look at LaMelo in his rookie year, how big of a splash he was able to make, I think LaMelo has a chance to become an all-star, if not next year, then maybe in 2 years' time. And that's something I'm afraid Lonzo will never enjoy in his career. So I would say that's kind of a bold statement for me.
Yeah, I'm going to say that's a hot take.
That's a hot take. That's a hot take. Especially coming from me, because I'm typically a Lonzo apologist. Like, I find ways to, look at the silver lining in Lonzo's game, in Lonzo's performances, even though I know he's really not that great. And he's not as great as he was hyped up to be when the Lakers drafted him. I still like him, of course. I still root for him on the Pelicans. I was happy to see him stay there and not get traded. But watching LaMelo play, and even watching the battle of the balls, right? I think a couple of games in this season, it was LaMelo versus Lonzo. LaMelo was just superior. man, in like almost every way. I used to say, "Oh, Lonzo's the better playmaker," but when you watch some of LaMelo's passes, he's pretty darn good too. You know. So
I think it's
yeah.
a little bit different now. I think yeah, Lamelo is a better playmaker, but Lonzo has better shooting now and better defense. I think the factor for Lonzo to get to make that next step is just to stay healthy. I think once he stays healthy, I think people will realize that maybe he's not as hyped he's not as good as he was hyped out to be as a rookie coming in,
Uh-huh.
but he's still damn good.
Yeah. Do you really think he's damn good though? I feel like he's almost becoming like a niche player where he kind of needs the right situation for him to thrive. And and because he lacks certain prerequisites of an NBA point guard, like his free throw shooting, albeit improved, is substandard for an NBA starting point guard. His 3-point shooting, as you discussed, it's gotten better. But do you really trust it, Derek? Do you really think it's consistent?
Well, that's what I want to say.
Yeah.
We've had one season of it. I would like to see another, one or two more seasons of solid shooting. But I think he just has to stay healthy first. That, I think that's the big key. And I think you make a good point where he has to be in a right situation.
Sure.
But that has to be, I think, that's like 80, that's like 90% of the NBA players we have today. Because there are only so many players that you can just throw into a situation and they'll thrive, right? You look at Kemba Walker, he was in a way he was great in Charlotte, but when he got to Boston, he's not doing so hot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And there's a lot of guys who do well at one team, and when they move to the next, they're not doing so well. But I think New Orleans has been great for Lonzo, and you're right with his free throw shooting, but then you look at Luka, and you think, what the heck is going on there? Because Luka's shooting 3-pointers at a higher rate than free throws. What? That doesn't even make sense. So free throws may be poor, but if you look at the rest of the impact, it might balance out. I'm not giving it I'm not trying to excuse poor free throw shooting, but I'm just saying just because it's bad doesn't mean you can't just take away the rest of his game.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. And you're right that for most people in the NBA, they're not like a LeBron James where you plop them down anywhere and they'll find a way to make the playoffs, if not win a championship. I think oftentimes you do need the right coaching situation, the right teammates around you to really achieve everything that you should achieve in your career. And so maybe you're right. Maybe Lonzo, if he does stick around on the Pelicans, hopefully he continues to build that relationship with Zion, the chemistry that he already has with Brandon Ingram, with Josh Hart, and they just continue and eventually make the playoffs. Because with all the young stars we talked about today, and we actually haven't touched on Ja Morant, but he's been playing amazingly well. I think we can both agree Ja Morant has been a sensation these playoffs, scoring 40 points multiple games, really coming out to become a all-star. I hope to see Zion join the ranks of a Ja Morant, of a Devin Booker, in the sense that he'll make the playoffs and he'll dominate to some extent. But time will tell. Time will tell. I think it's...
Yeah, I forget that, that you're a pretty big Zion fan. I don't know how big, but you're pretty big. You're the biggest Zion fan I know.
But that surprises me, because I would expect most of your friends to like Zion, but that's not the case?
Not really.
Wow.
I think it's partially due to the fact that there was a lot of hype around him, at Duke. He went to Duke, right? I don't want to, get that
yeah,
wrong.
Sure. Let's say he went to Duke. I'll cross-check really quickly. Let's see, Zion Duke, typing away right now as we speak. Yes, he went to Duke.
Okay,
Yes,
cool.
Yes.
There was a lot of hype around him, right? But if you look at his game, it's very much bully ball, and not much else.
Mm.
So, like he kind of feels like a more efficient young Randall. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, actually, that's a very solid comparison. Early on, when I first
Yeah.
caught wind of Zion, I thought, oh, this is like a more polished and athletic Randall.
Right,
He's
polished. That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
mhm.
But like, I think there needs to be more. Like with Ja, he can take over, right? Ja's been doing that. He's been carrying the team to multiple wins. So I don't see Zion doing that because he's not a playmaker. He's kind of just like a scorer or a rebounder or
But see,
a guy in the
you're absolutely
paint.
you're absolutely right. But the part that I worry about is this: aren't we always, giving a disadvantage to big men? Then, like, if these guys are always compared to the point guards, and the point guards naturally have the ball in their hands. Nowadays, they're getting rebounds too, like Westbrook, like Ja. If you're a big man that's more power, right? That's more focused on scoring on the inside, is it just a natural disadvantage?
That's a fair point, but I think it's hard to say now because in the modern NBA we have guys like Embiid, we have guys like Jokic, who we have like guys like Sabonis, who can do multiple things, like who can pass the ball very well, who can shoot at a very good clip. So it's hard to really like move the line down just for Zion, if that makes sense. Move the bar down.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. I think bigs nowadays are more versatile than they were back in the day. Maybe if Zion was around in the early 2000s or even in the 90s, we would see him as a more prolific player. We would see him more collectively as, oh yeah, he's the next big thing. He's totally like Shaq 2.0. But in today's NBA, it's kind of a shame because unless he shows more facets of his game over time, unless he develops a consistent, spot up 3-point shot, unless he develops, I think he's a decent playmaker, to be honest. He doesn't do it as often with like Alonzo and Ingram next to him, but if you remember, there was a stretch of games where Alonzo sat out this year, and the ball was in Zion's hands more, and he was getting more assists. He was getting like 5, 6, 7 assists. I didn't know he could do that on a regular basis, and it kind of begs the question, maybe Zion just needs more opportunity with the ball in his hands, similar to how Giannis was really allowed to flourish when Jason Kidd, back then being the coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, gave him the opportunity to be the point guard, right? He became point Giannis, and that caused him to like take that next step in his career and eventually win back-to-back MVPs. So maybe that's what's happening here. Maybe if Zion is destined to be a Pelican for life or stay here for a few years longer, the coaching staff needs to find a way to make him more of the featured playmaker on the team, to open up other facets of his game, to be comparable to the likes of Jokic, to the likes of Sabonis. But man, oh man, every year I tell myself in fantasy, at the end of the season, after looking at Sabonis' stats, after looking at Jokic's stats, I'm definitely drafting these guys next year. Like, I have to. If I want to win, if I'm trying to win, I got to get these guys. But then, stupid me, like every time the draft happens, the actual fantasy draft, I do the stupidest shit. And you know what I did this year. I drafted Devin Booker first round from like the 7th or 8th pick.
Well, to be fair, if you went off bubble performance, that was kind of a decent pick. Because he was, in the bubble, he was phenomenal, right? But I think with the added addition of Chris Paul, who you mentioned earlier, it took away a lot of Booker's ball handling.
Yes, it did.
So, in a way, he did regress in terms of fantasy. So, yeah, it kind of sucks how that played out, but, it happens. It happens. You just got to hope you get an earlier pick next year. Come on, Kamish.
It's funny you mentioned that. There was a stretch, and I kid you not, of either 2 or 3 straight seasons where with the randomly generated selection, I ended up getting the first overall pick back-to-back-to-back seasons. And it was so bad starting from the second year that I actually had to like get screenshots and capture timestamps to show, no, I only generated it one time. This is really random. It's not me fucking around here. And I'm almost relieved now whenever I don't get the number one overall pick, because I feel like once you get it once or twice in a row, everybody starts getting more suspicious. They don't really trust that it's truly random,
Well, I mean, as a fellow commish, I do know it's random because if you go onto the page, the league page at the bottom, it does say like how many times the commish has generated the draft order.
Sure.
So I trust you 100% on that.
It's just
but it just sucks, when like the guy who has the last pick gets the near bottom pick again the next season, right? Or like the guy who's had the top 3 pick every single year. It does suck, and like every year I hope like, okay, I hope when I click this button that says generate draft order, that it will truly be fair and everyone gets a random spot and it doesn't happen, like relatively the same order as last year. So yeah, it sucks when it does come down to that, but what can we do? We just go with AI and trust AI. And
yeah, trusting in Allen Iverson is the right way to go. But one thing I do have to bring up, are you thinking of making any major changes to your league in the coming season? One thing I know that was brought up, oftentimes the final week or two of the regular season is just full of these silly season players, meaning random players coming off the bench that suddenly become 40-minute a night, consistent, heavy producers because their teams are tanking, the stars are resting. It's just kind of a mess. So one of the changes I know we were both thinking of making is to curtail the end of the season by 1 or 2 weeks. But aside from that one, are you thinking of maybe doing anything more experimental, like having a keeper league, or allowing, let's say, draft picks to be traded, or who knows, changing the scoring categories? Have you thought of anything wild like that?
I've always wanted to try a keeper league or a dynasty league, because that's when the trading picks really comes into play, right? Because if your draft order changes every year, it doesn't really make a difference if you trade your pick, because you won't know what the other person has.
Sure.
So it doesn't really make too much sense. As far as one thing that I probably will change is the injured player list.
Okay.
So this year they brought up the new feature of like injured list plus. I think that was what it was called, where you can put in like game time decision players or like guys who are out and swap them in. Yeah, so they brought that in the middle of the season, which was annoying because we didn't really get to implement it.
Sure.
So that probably will replace the purely injured list slots in the next season, as long as they keep that feature around.
That's one thing that I've been thinking about. Like, this year in my league, I had the 2 IR spots when usually I have 1, primarily for COVID reasons. And I think you either had 3 initially, or you also had 2. I forget exactly.
Yeah, I kept it at 2.
Okay.
I've had 2 since last. No, I had 2 since the beginning of the season, because I know in your league we brought it in the middle, or like a couple weeks in.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure what to do for next year, because I fully anticipate things to go back to normal, at least in NBA respects, for 82 games, and all the travel restrictions are kind of now going away. Are you still going to have 2 IR spots or 2 IR plus spots?
Yeah, so intentionally, initially I wanted one spot to be COVID only, which is hard to really regulate. But so going into next season, I would ideally keep it as 1, unless, COVID is still somehow a more prevalent thing, even though we have vaccines and everything.
Sure.
Knocking on wood that doesn't happen. So yeah, I would probably keep it at 1.
I think I might join you in that one. I might go back to 1.
I think but at the same time, it's again like if in the case something does happen, we can always add another spot. we
Yeah.
can't really take away spots.
That's true.
So
I do
better
like
safe than
how
sorry.
exactly. I do like how Yahoo allows you to add later on, even mid-season. That's a good plus. I'd say we've had a lot of interesting additions today in terms of the commentary on the NBA. We've had a lot of interesting talks about even some current events with celebrities like John Cena, LeBron James talking about foreign politics and whatnot. We have missed somebody on this show, though. As much as I've ragged on him, I think we have missed the D, aka Don, who's my usual co-host for the show. So in the closing minutes of this podcast, Derek, I know you were hoping to have a conversation with the D, but he is alas not here. But to fret not, I think next time, if you're so willing, when you're back to rejoin the podcast, I'll make sure Don's around. But for now, what question or what comments would you have to make toward Don? Maybe about his performance, about his opinions, about certain topics. What message do you have for the D?
Well, I mean, first off, the podcast has been really enjoyable to listen to with you and Don.
Oh, sweet of you.
But there are some hot takes, man. You guys have some hot takes, whether it be basketball or football.
Yeah.
Because I listened to the Super Bowl podcast episode. And
Oh, yeah?
Man, there were a lot of takes on there, and I was like, what is going on?
What did we say? What were the hot
That's
takes?
the thing. I can't really remember. I mean, some of them had to do with Tom Brady. And as you know, I'm a Tom Brady fan.
Sure.
So some of the comments that you guys made, I don't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I had a rebuttal, or I had a comment about it.
Ooh.
So maybe next year, the Super Bowl or playoff NFL season, maybe I could come through and we can have a talk about all that.
Absolutely. And one thing you probably picked up very quickly, neither of us, Don or myself, do the adequate research before the shows. Sometimes we just talk about these topics that really we have no business talking about. And it even got to a point where we were talking about the NFL, maybe as part of that episode or a different one. Don thought there were 30 teams or fewer teams.
That was one of those.
That was one of
those. That was one of those. I was like, something's wrong here.
Yes. And so, we have a lot of those moments where we say certain things, and this is kind of a message to the greater audience of the SoCal DNA podcast. I know we probably piss you off from some time to time with our ignorance, with just our buffoonery, but the way I look at it, it's really two people who are trying their best using the limited information or misinformation that they have to come up with points, to come up with arguments, and just battle against each other.
It does make it very entertaining. I'll say that. It's very entertaining.
I appreciate that. And, well, I hope, Derek, you had a swell time today, catching up a little bit, talking about the NBA, just shooting the breeze. And we hope to have you back sometime in the future, whenever you're interested, to the SoCal DNA. Did you have a good time today?
Yeah, it's great. I appreciate it. It's my first podcast, I've never done one of these before. It does just feel like a conversation, which I enjoy that aspect of. So yeah, I appreciate you having me.
Thank you. And that's what we strive for whenever we have a guest on the show. And we've had several so far. Very fortunately, people have been nice enough to us. Our friends have been nice enough to us to basically join the show. But it's been a blast, and it's always great catching up with you, DZ. Tremendous congratulations for the success that you had in fantasy basketball. And your opinions of basketball and all things in life are very much respected here on the show, and of course personally with me. So thank you so much for joining. I wish you nothing but the best in 2021, and until next time, my friends, this is the A from SoCal DNA signing off. Take care.